It began as all great storms do, not with thunder, but with silence. In the soft light of a Paris recording studio, the spring air of 2025 trembled behind the blinds. Vanessa Paradis sat before a microphone, her fingers tracing invisible notes on the wooden table as a journalist asked gently, "If you could describe your years with Johnny in one sentence, what would it be?" She paused. A half smile flickered, fragile, nostalgic, before she whispered, "Devastating." Her voice didn't carry anger, it carried fatigue, the kind only love can create. "He loved me like a storm," she continued softly, "and I was too tired to keep rebuilding." The room fell still. Even the sound engineer forgot to stop the tape. Outside, the rain began, soft at first, then relentless, as if the weather itself was listening. For over a decade, Vanessa had been silent. Now, in that single sentence, the world finally understood. It wasn't a story about heartbreak. It was the anatomy of survival. 14 years, 2 children, 1,000 quiet mornings between film sets and lullabies. They were the beautiful contradiction, the wild American and the grounded French muse who made family look like poetry. They never needed vows or rings. Their rebellion was love without paperwork, devotion without signatures. But instinct, like weather, changes. Behind their serene facade was something quieter, more dangerous, exhaustion. The kind that seeps in slowly, like rain through a cracked roof. Johnny Depp, the man who turned pain into performance, carried shadows that fame only deepened. Vanessa, patient and luminous, became both witness and refuge, until the shelter she built could no longer hold back the storm. In the late 1990s, the world still believed in the magic of opposites. He was the restless boy from Kentucky, the Hollywood misfit who could turn loneliness into art, chaos into characters. She was the French songbird with a voice like velvet and eyes that carried the sadness of old poetry. When Johnny Depp met Vanessa Paradis in Paris 1998, something rare happened. The storm found its shoreline. They crossed paths in a quiet hotel by the river. She wore black, simple, unassuming. "The first thing I saw was her back," Johnny once said. "Then she turned, and I knew." That turn changed everything. For the first time in years, the noise of Hollywood, its applause, its temptations, its glittering machinery, fell away. In her silence, he found peace. Vanessa was never dazzled by his fame. She was intrigued by his silences, by the parts of him that the world never saw. And so he followed her, to France, to simplicity, to the rhythm of ordinary mornings. He traded red carpets for cobblestones, premieres for Parisian markets, chaos for the calm of the Seine. They built a home in the south, a farmhouse surrounded by olive trees and light. For 14 years, they lived between worlds, the rebel actor and the gentle chanteuse who believed in privacy more than publicity. To the outside world, they seemed untouchable, the perfect dream of art and love. But beneath that dream, there were tremors. He thrived on transformation, on becoming someone else, on chasing extremes. She built her life on continuity, quiet routines, small rituals, the slow care of love, tended like a garden. At first, their differences danced together beautifully. She gave him roots, he gave her fire. But time, patient and merciless, began to reveal the imbalance. When one becomes the lighthouse and the other the ship chasing storms, both eventually drown. He disappeared into roles, into nights, into the ache of unfinished selves. She sang lullabies to their children and left lyrics on the piano for him to find. You sleep in the shadows, she once wrote. I keep watch in the light. Their privacy wasn't a strategy, it was survival. Because fame is not just a thief of peace, it is a thief of truth. And behind their closed doors, the air began to thin. As the years passed, the quiet between them became louder. Johnny's inner storms, the insomnia, the restlessness, the endless search for danger began to return. Fame, that old addiction, came knocking again, promising escape, but never peace. Vanessa, ever patient, tried to build around it. She moved like someone walking barefoot through a broken glass, cautious, gentle, hoping love could still protect what was fragile. When asked why they never married, she would smile softly. Marriage is just paper, she'd say. Love is proof enough. And though it sounded romantic, perhaps it was also a warning, because love without boundaries can eventually spill over. Their home was filled with music and art and tension. Johnny would fill the house with roses after a fight, petals carpeting the floorboards days later, wilted but fragrant. Their life became a rhythm of retreat and return. He vanished into work. She vanished into silence. Each believed they were protecting the children from the weather of their love. To the public, they remained the embodiment of serenity. Two artists who had somehow tamed the machinery of fame. But those closest to them could see it. She was always holding things together, and he was always trying to reinvent what already existed. By 2011, the balance had shifted. It wasn't anger that divided them. It was accumulation. Missed birthdays, long nights apart, apologies said too late. Vanessa began to understand that the man she loved was also the man she could never truly follow, because his path always led toward the storm. Still, she stayed longer than most would have, because she believed that love, real love, wasn't a firework. It was endurance, a practice, a vow spoken in silence. He's not cruel, she once told a friend. He's just haunted. And in that haunting, she stayed until the echoes became louder than the music. In the end, there was no explosion, no grand betrayal, just erosion, slow, silent, unstoppable. The tide came in again and again, washing away the foundations she had built so carefully. To the world, they still looked perfect, the artist couple who proved that fame and family could coexist. But inside their quiet farmhouse, they were two souls fighting different wars under the same roof. Before the final storm, they smiled for one last photograph. She in black, he in his hat, their children between them. The camera caught light, not weather, but Vanessa later confessed that light was already fading when the shutter clicked. The greatest loneliness she would learn is the one that lives inside love. For years, she had loved a man whose emotions could turn into poetry, whose pain could become art, but rarely conversation. She learned to read his silences like weather, the still air before a storm, the smell of rain that signaled retreat. At first, it was romantic, the melancholy, the depth, the mystery. She believed it was the cost of genius. Some souls, she once said, need turbulence to breathe. But over time, that turbulence became constant. The mystery turned into distance. His moods swung like a pendulum, from tenderness to withdrawal, from laughter to isolation. On good days, he was radiant, writing, cooking for their children, playing guitar until the house hummed with warmth. On others, he was unreachable, even while sitting beside her. Fame had made him visible to everyone, but accessible to no one. Vanessa loved him through it all, but even love, if it never rests, begins to collapse under its own weight. She became the lighthouse, steady, bright, always waiting, but even lighthouses crack. And one evening, while helping her daughter with homework, Vanessa realized something that froze her heart. She hadn't spoken to Johnny in 3 days. Not a fight, not silence as punishment, just absence. She looked at her child, saw the stillness in her eyes, and thought, I need to build a home that doesn't move. That night, she wrote in her journal, love cannot be both rescue and residence. In the months that followed, they tried again. Vacations, dinners, promises whispered between fading stars, but every calm was temporary. The storm, like an old friend, always returned. Johnny would apologize with sincerity, his eyes tired, his hands trembling with guilt. He wanted a stillness, but stillness frightened him. To him, silence wasn't peace, it was a mirror, and what he saw there was too raw, too unfinished. Vanessa stopped waiting for change. Instead, she began to mourn, quietly, invisibly, while still living inside the relationship. She mourned the laughter, the late-night talks, the version of him who once believed that peace was possible. Sometimes she would watch him sleep and wonder, is he dreaming of me or freedom? Her friends said she was too forgiving, but forgiveness for Vanessa wasn't weakness. It was her way of loving, deeply, dangerously, and without armor. She forgave because she understood him. But one day she realized understanding doesn't heal you. It only explains why you bleed. There was one night near the end when the rain hit the windows like memory. Johnny sat on the floor with his guitar, playing a melody so sorrowful it felt like confession. When he finished, he looked up at her and said, "You're the only thing that's ever made a sense." She whispered, almost to herself, "Then why do you keep losing it?" He had no answer, and that was the moment she knew. It wasn't anger that would end them, but exhaustion. Not a storm that breaks, but a fog that never lifts. One morning, she woke and felt it clearly. She had nothing left to rebuild with. The house still stood, but her heart had quietly moved out. Even as she left, she didn't hate him. You can't hate the storm that taught you how to swim. For years afterward, she avoided speaking about their love. She wanted to protect what little truth remained unsaid. Until that day in the Paris studio, when her voice finally broke the silence, he loved me like a storm, and I was too tired to keep rebuilding. It wasn't a confession, it was a eulogy, not for him, but for the woman she used to be. There was a silence that follows truth, not comforting, but clarifying. When Vanessa spoke those words in 2025, the world heard them as revelation. But for her, they were simply an echo of an ending already lived. After their separation, she rebuilt her life in miniature. A smaller home, a gentler rhythm, mornings with coffee and notebooks, music returning like an old friend. Her children's laughter replaced the noise of apology. She didn't erase Johnny, she just stopped orbiting around him. Meanwhile, Johnny drifted from set to set, city to city. Still brilliant, still restless. His performances grew darker, his art more haunted. The storm hadn't left him, it had merely changed address. And sometimes, when asked about her, his voice would soften. She was my compass. I still look for her light. Vanessa heard that once on the radio while driving through Saint-Germain. She pulled over, her hands trembling, not from pain, but from recognition. They had become two parallel truths. He loved her the only way he knew, and she left the only way she could. Love, she realized, cannot fix what refuses to be still. He was born for motion, she for roots. The very forces that drew them together were the ones that tore them apart. Their final goodbye wasn't cinematic. No shouting, no door slamming, just one quiet morning in the south of France. Pale sky, air heavy with rain. He stood in the doorway, barefoot, exhausted. "I don't want to hurt you," he said softly. "You're not," she replied. "You're just being you." He looked at her, really looked, and understood. She was already gone. Love, once their shelter, had become an echo in empty rooms. She walked to the window and opened it. The scent of wet earth drifted in. Somewhere outside, their son laughed. And for the first time in years, that sound didn't ache. It healed. That was their real farewell. No tragedy, no villains, just two souls who had given each other everything and found it wasn't enough. Years later, when asked again about him, Vanessa smiled and said, "He loved me like a storm, and I was too tired to keep rebuilding." Each word deliberate, graceful, not an accusation, but understanding, because the storm wasn't his fault, it was his nature, and her leaving wasn't weakness, it was survival. This was the truth most love stories never dare to tell, that sometimes the person who saves your soul is the same one who later breaks your peace, that love can be real and still not be forever. Freedom, Vanessa discovered, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sounds like rain falling without fear. And somewhere across an ocean, Johnny might have felt it too. That subtle release in the air, that sigh of calm after years of thunder. Their story was never a tragedy. It was a weather pattern, wild, luminous, and finite. Some loves don't end, they transform. They leave behind not bitterness, but a strange, tender grace. Now, when Vanessa sings, her voice carries that peace. She no longer sings to be understood. She sings to remember. And maybe, just maybe, Johnny listens, not as the man she left, but as the artist who finally understands the cost of being loved too much. Because love, after all, isn't always about surviving the storm together. Sometimes it's about knowing when to step out of the rain and whisper softly, "Thank you,"